Go then. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I hope that you realize that you're in for a treat. There's not many of you, but you will enjoy what you have tonight. I've known Rich Froeschle and heard him talk, and he will have a great amount of data and information and stories and just cool stuff to share with you that will be very insightful. My name is Susan Dawson. I'm President and Executive Director of E3 Alliance. I'm a former business entrepreneur turned social entrepreneur in the education sector, and I'm former chair of the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm very interested in the topic that Rich has tonight. Unfortunately, I have kid duty, so I have to sneak out.
I'll send you the slides.
Good, I'll take them. But this intersection between education and job skills and workforce needs and where are we going and what do we have to do to prepare ourselves and our community to succeed in this economic environment will be a really interesting topic, I hope, for you all. This is part of the Imagine Austin Speaker Series, which was developed to promote and implement the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan, which hopefully you've seen. It's many parts. It is comprehensive, but one key part of that is preparing for our economic future. This talks bring nationally known experts to talk about a whole variety of issues, from land use to built and natural environment to social equity and certainly economy, which is what you'll hear about tonight. The event is hosted by the City of Austin's Planning and Development Review and the Economic Development Departments. That's who brought you the cookies and the cheese, so please, so they don't have to eat it all for the rest of the week. Feel free to join it. Oh, ACC did. Well, there you go. Thanks to ACC. So there are a variety of sponsors for the event. ACC is one of them. Thank you for doing that. As well as 3 school districts, Austin ISD, Hayes Consolidated ISD, and Leander ISD, as well as the Community Advancement Network. Many of you may have known it as the Community Action Network, but they recently adopted a new terminology, which is great for our community. Ready by 21 and my own organization, E3 Alliance. So we've come together to try share information with our community. So Austin is one of the fastest growing cities in the nation. You see those statistics every day about how many more people move to our city and our region. But you also probably have heard about how the growth is not equitable. We talk about it all the time as the tale of two cities, where industries and job markets have very different benefits that are coming from this growing economy. And Rich Froeschle is here to talk about factors like demographic changes, technology, industry growth, how they affect job opportunities, and how they can influence the educational choices that students are making today to prepare them for those opportunities. He's got 37 years of experience in workforce strategic planning. He's worked in the labor market. He's a former director of the Texas Workforce Commission, so he knows what he's talking about. I'm going to break the rules now. It says that I'm supposed to tell you that he's going to talk for 45 minutes and to hold your questions till the end, but since we have a nice intimate audience, I think he'd probably rather have it be an interactive exchange so that we can get the most out of it and that he can give the most information that you've got. So thank you for coming, Rich. We appreciate your being here tonight, and thank you to Imagine Austin for helping host these events. Thank you.
Excellent. Well done, you rule breaker, you. Let me grab this. Okay. Hi, how's everybody doing this evening? Excellent. Okay, so let me talk to my camera person for a minute. This is where I'm going to be mostly from here over to here. All right, are we good? All right, excellent. All right, I'm Rich Froeschle. I am, as of 2 weeks ago, I am no longer the director of the Labor Market and Career Information Department of the Texas Workforce Commission, having retired after 37 years of service. But I've spent my entire career looking at the labor market, not just studying the economy, not just looking at education, not just dealing with workforce issues. I'm supposed to use this, sorry. But dealing with the labor market implications of the labor market. And when we say that, what we're talking about is what jobs are being created, what industries, what occupations, what's influencing job creation, how is the education and training community responding to what's going on in the labor market and job opportunities. And so the interplay of general economic conditions, of the labor market, of the education community, and the alignment of all of that. Now, when I start using the words aligning will and skill, when I say will and skill, you'll know that there's only 5 minutes left in this presentation, all right? So for those of you that are going, God, I hope he gets that will and skill stuff really quick, that's your foreshadowing going forward. But just like Susan said, let's do this in a very interactive way. So if I hit something, you go, well, I don't see that, or what about this, or it's a very interesting observation, but how about this, that, or the other thing? Just raise your hand, we'll talk about it. If I don't have an answer, I'll say that I don't have an answer, I'll refer you to someplace else, or we can have a nice little discussion over it. So I'm good, just make it informal. And last but not least, anybody that wants any of the slides that I'm going to do, you are more than welcome to have them, all right? I'm no longer from the government, but they're still free, and I'm still here to help. So leave me a card or a piece of paper or something like that. I'd be more than happy to email the slides, and you can use them however you want in your own personal environments. All right? Deal? Are we good? Okay. So I call this Will and Skill, by the way. Here's my email address. That's TXLMI guy, just in case you look at all those strange combination of letters. That's txlmiguy@gmail.com if you want to contact me later on. Okay. So, as in every good economics presentation, I'm going to start with a Harry Truman quote that says, all my economists say on the one hand, on the other hand, what I really need is a one-handed economist, because anybody that's tried to know what's going on in the labor market has 4, 5, 6, a dozen different interpretations. In fact, it's one of the most interesting things about studying the labor market is every one of us has its own personal case. The labor market is composed of millions of individual actors, from individuals, from educational institutions, from business community, and we are all trying to find a way to piece ourselves together. Now, interesting, when the unemployment rate is 5%, what's the employment rate? 95%, right? So we really, when we think about a 5% unemployment rate, you think about 95% of the labor market, of all of those actors, have actually found some connection someplace in the world. So when we talk about new graduates coming out of the system, we're really looking at dealing with the labor market on the margins, by and large. So we're going to talk about what some of those things look like. Now, just to give you an idea about how complicated the labor market really is and why there's not one single economist that has any sense of what's really going on, here's a graphic to take a look at. The labor market is influenced by everything that's going around. I'm just going to call that the Texas economy. The Texas economy is influenced by all of these things in the yellow boxes and lots of others I'm not even talking about, like federal regulation, administrative issues, all kinds of things. Demographics. Is the demographics of the state of Texas changing at all? Do we see any change? Absolutely you do. Where we live, what we look like, the age, race, gender of the population changing significantly. And it's having a really interesting influence not only on the labor supply, or the labor force, but also on the consumer side, right? Because different age groups buy different products, different race ethnic groups buy different products, invest in different services. Demographics, energy, the U.S. economy as a whole, access to capital and credit, consumer demand, industry mix, telecommunications, internet, Web 2.0. Is social media and the internet changing the way we do business in a lot of different industries? Absolutely it is. Let me tell you one quick story because it just happened to me today. My phone is with the Apple people today because it's got a broken screen. So it reminded me of a story where I had a guy in one of my groups, and he was a young guy. He was about 25, 26, and he was the Career and Technology Education Director from an East Texas school district. And he had about a 20-minute commute to go to from his house to go into the office. So he's about 3/4 of the way there, and he realizes that he left his phone at home. Okay. He's got to be at his first period class in 15 minutes. So there's no way he can go home and still get to his first period class. So he's got a moral dilemma here, all right? So what do you think this guy does, all right? He's 25, 26 years old. Does he makes his first period class, does he show up on time, but go the entire day without his phone? Or does he go home, get his phone, show up late for his class, but at least still have his phone, all right? Here's the moral dilemma. Now, how many of you think he went to class, showed up on time, and went the entire day without his phone? Anybody? How many of you think he went home because there's no way he was going to live an entire day without his phone? All right. And the answer to the question is yes, he went home, he was late. When the principal found him and he said, why weren't you on time for your first period class? And he said, well, I left my phone at home. You didn't actually expect me to go all day, without a phone, do you? Now, think about that generationally. Think about the impact of technology, but the way that we think about technology across generations, age, race, gender, and demographics, as well as the implications of being not tied to the interweb in any way, shape, or form. All right. Innovation and technology. What's the next big thing? What's the next big thing that's going to be a job creator? Anybody know? What is it?
Probably something with social media marketing.
So you think it's in the social media marketing area? What else?
Consulting.
Consulting as a line of business. What about healthcare? Healthcare? How about manufacturing, advanced manufacturing? Okay, where is the job creation, and what is the technology, and what are the business practices that's going to change that labor market, have an influence not just on the economy as a whole, but it's going to be a job creator along the way. Tradable skills and occupational blending. How many of you have seen occupational titles that you couldn't explain to your parents? All right. Anybody have any of those? All right. Occupational titles. We'll look at some of them a little later on. It's a really interesting phenomenon. We talk about what the education community is supposed to do to prepare people for the world of work when business is using job titles that none of us can even recognize anymore. All right. So you have this sort of disconnect across titles, and trying to figure out what that supply-demand mix needs to be is particularly interesting. The impact of globalization, I got one sentence to say about that. 25% of the Texas economy is wrapped up in global trade, in global supply chain. One of the hottest fields we have going right now is logistics, global logistics. All right, so 25% of the Texas economy is tied up in the global economy. Is everything related to globalization important to the Texas labor market? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And last but not least, changes in new business practices, supply chain, how we're using technology, not just to pave the cow path. In other words, not just to do things in the exact way we've always done them, but to do them in new and exciting ways. That's that creative intersection of creativity with technology, which, by the way, for those people thinking about your next major or your next pursuit, that area where you're taking technology skills and you're mixing with creative thought process and problem-solving processes, that's the intersection that business is most excited about. So all of these things and others are different ways to think about the labor market. Now, in order to actually understand this, we need to talk about data, which means you need to practice a little bit. Everybody want to practice with me? All right, so factoid number one. The Japanese eat less red meat and drink less red wine than do the Americans or the British, and they have a much lower incidence of heart attack. True or false? Absolutely true. Factoid number two. The Italians eat more red meat and drink much more red wine than do the Americans or the British, and yet they too have a lower incidence of heart attack. True or false? It is exactly true. So from these two true factoids, what do you conclude?
Austin, the U.S. has a problem with
You're way overthinking this. It's pretty easy. Go ahead and eat whatever you want. It's pretty clear that speaking English is what kills you, all right? So you think about this. Is it possible to take any two factoids, put them together, and draw spurious conclusions from them? And the answer is yes. And so we're going to try to avoid that. Now, for those of you that like those spurious conclusions, there's actually a website that's called spuriousconclusions.com. And there's some really interesting observations about correlation and causality. But one of the most interesting things was, if we want more civil engineering graduates, we need to spend more money on pet food. All right, just the relationship between the expenditures on pet food and the number of engineering degrees granted has a 0.98 correlation associated with it. All right, some themes for the day. I got 8 basic themes. This is all you really need to walk away with related to this presentation. Number one, the Texas economy is stronger than the U.S. and has been. It was late coming into the recession. In other words, the recession was well underway nationally before Texas got in. We got out of the recession faster, much more robustly, and in the period, in the post-recession period, our growth rate averaging somewhere between 2.8 and 3.5% has been at least double the national rate. We are not, however, immune from a lot of the global macroeconomic forces that are going on. So when the Chinese growth rate slows a little bit, when Europe goes into recession, because a quarter of the Texas economy is related to the global labor market, there are implications to the Texas economy, to Texas business, and to Texas job creation. Number two, structural imbalances lead to isolated skill shortages, despite general labor shortages. You go, What the heck does that mean? Well, it means is even though we've got a lot of people that are unemployed, we also have a lot of emerging skill shortages in specific fields. And part of that is that lack of connection or that mismatch between what's coming out of the education system and what the business community is looking at. I'm going to talk a lot about that as we go forward. But what it also means is we've got a big chunk of the unemployed people, probably 4.5 million people in the United States who've been unemployed for more than 37 weeks, all right? And there's a lot of jobs that are sitting out there. There's about 4.7 million job postings on the internet sitting out right out there today. You'd think, well, if you've got 4.7 million jobs, you got 4.7 million unemployed people, you just put them all together, unemployment gone, right? Well, it just doesn't work that way, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Number 3, job growth has not been accompanied by wage growth. I really liked Susan's introductions because we've seen a lot of job creation, but all that job creation has not necessarily been in high-skill, high-wage jobs. As a matter of fact, we've seen very large concentrations of job growth in both industries and occupations that are dominated by low skill, low wage, and part-time. And it's very prominent. So what you've seen is despite the fact that you've seen a lot of job growth, you've seen actually relative declines in household income, personal household income, and even the per capita income is just barely creeping forward over the last 4 or 5 years. So wage growth is a problem. And why do we care whether there's any wage growth or not? Because if there's no money in your pocket, what are you not spending? The money you don't have. And if you're not spending money, who's buying what? All right, so money in your pocket leads to economic growth, and that's a big problem for us. Demographic shifts are changing the face of the Texas labor market, where we live, what we look like. I'm going to talk about that. Nobody lives in Texas. Every region of the state is very different. If you want to be a marine biologist and you want to live in Amarillo, Texas, all right, what are the odds that there's going to be a lot of jobs available for you? Probably not. If you want to be a ski instructor and live in Houston, what are the odds there's going to be a lot of jobs for you? Not a lot. So this mismatch geographically is also an issue for us. Number 6, recent Texas job growth has largely been fueled by 3 basic economic tent posts. And this is holding true in almost every region of the state. The 3 tent posts are population growth, all right, because Texas has added more people over the last 15 years by far than any other state in the country. So when we talk about population growth, what industries are driven by population growth? What industries? Education is right up on the list. What's number 2? Healthcare is number 2. And what's number 3? That's like number 4, because it assumes that there's still a supply of housing that has to get exhausted before you really start stimulating extra construction. What do all those people have to do? Retail. They have to go and shop, and that's what they do. So those 3 major sectors, healthcare, education, and retail, you see in the data a lot, especially in a labor market like Austin that has a really large retail, service, leisure, and hospitality sector, and you'll see that in the data. So that's 1. Number 2 is everything up and down the oil and gas supply chain, right? So if anybody will tell you that this has not been an oily recovery driven by all that horizontal drilling and fracking all over the state, plus the manufacturing, the distribution, all of the technical services that are associated with the oil and gas industry, then they're telling you a story, all right? Because everything driven by this, not everything, a big chunk of what's been driven by the Texas growth has been related to the oil and gas supply chain. And number 3, professional and business services. It's an industry category. Just based on the nature of that title, professional business services, what would you think? High skill or low skill kinds of occupations? High skill occupations, all right? So we've got a lot of our higher skilled occupations are falling in that category. We're going to want to look a little deeper to see where those jobs are. Number 7, occupational demand is becoming more bifurcated. How many of you woke up this morning and said, dang, I hope that economist uses the word bifurcated at least once today? Anybody? All right, so interesting when we say bifurcated, that means we've got 2 tails. That means we've got haves and have-nots. That means we've got a lot of people on the lower end, low skill, not making a lot of money, and a lot of people that are doing quite well in high skill, high wage kind of positions. But what's happening, we're hollowing out that middle. Susan referred to it in her introduction. So Austin is getting to be a tale of 2 cities where we've got a lot of people that are doing quite well here, all right? We've also got a lot of people that are really struggling. And as those 2 groups become more and more bifurcated or separated, both in terms of their skill set, okay, which influences their ability to rise, and their earnings, which influences their ability to spend and provide for their families, and in terms of their wealth, all right? So that means that they don't have the wealth base to deal with their retirement and everything else. So that bifurcation is becoming a really big deal for us. The labor market is really starting to emphasize skill sets, all right? So that's the first time I'm going to say skills, but skill sets are a really big deal. I'm not going to speak as much today about degrees as I am about acquiring skill sets. I'm not going to beat up somebody for getting a psychology degree as long as they're picking up marketable skills along with it, all right? So the basis of what the business community is looking at is, do you have the skills that are in demand relative to the labor market? And experience. It's really hard for young people right now that don't have any experience. That's why so many people are doing these internships and the focus to be able to get some connection to the labor market, because the business community is really looking for people that have a good fit, the right skills and the right experience. And last but not least, IT. Here we are in Austin. Information technology, it is not a major. It is not an occupation. It is not an industry. It is a ubiquitous skill set that permeates all industries. So you've got IT jobs at Wendy's, about, let's see, what's the last number? Somewhere between 12 and 13% of Wendy's total employment are IT-related workers, all right? So it's crossing retail trade, wholesale trade, healthcare, construction, every sector involved with IT-related skills. As a matter of fact, part of what we talk about with this digital divide are those people that feel comfortable applying advanced analog and digital technology in their respective fields, and those people that are afraid of technology or don't have the ability to apply technology in a problem-solving environment. That's where that digital divide we talk about comes from. And that's starting. It's significantly influencing that bifurcation we mentioned earlier. All right, so there's just 8 kinds of things, all things being equal. Now let me talk real quickly about the national economy going forward. I have to do at least one of these in order to keep my economist license, so here's my chart. See the blue line? That's the number of new hires, the number of new hires. Those are people that are showing up on an employer's payroll for the first time. Notice the gray area in the middle is the recession. So you've got the blue, the recession. Obviously, new hiring activity really dipped during the recession. And see the nice upward flow of that new hire? So it's recovering nicely, right? So that's a nice, slow, steady recovery period. The United States has added jobs for 52 consecutive months. Texas added jobs for 54 consecutive months. It's been a nice, positive upward swing. Not particularly robust, but nice, positive upward swing. But notice where we were before the recession. Look at the level of new hires before the recession. So you're back here. Let's see if I have this. Yeah. See, you're back here in 2006, 2007, 2008. You're talking about new hires in the 5.2, 5.3 million range. And we're down here. We think this is pretty good, coming up as, what is that, about 4.8 million. So you're still 400,000 or 500,000 new hires short of where we were before the recession. That's kind of why it doesn't feel like it's been a really robust recovery. You see, the path has been really nice, but we're still well below where we were before the recession. All right, here's the other one I want you to look at. See this red line? This is separations. These are people leaving jobs. Sometimes they're losing them, involuntary. Sometimes they're quitting, voluntary, but they're losing jobs. Kind of interesting how they sort of walk and talk in the same way, isn't it? In the same direction. Why is that? Why is that? Interestingly, if we talk about that 95% employment rate and you've got a job posting, what are the odds that that employer is going to hire somebody from the ranks of the already employed? Only 5% are unemployed, and you've got a big chunk of those people that are structurally unemployed, in other words, simply do not have the skill sets. We don't like to say they're unemployable, but they are challenged in the labor market. What you're really doing, by and large, is pulling people from the ranks of the employed out of this. So the one thing you want to ask me is, Rich, how many of those are voluntary and how many of those are involuntary? And I'd say, that's an excellent question. There's your blue line. This is your quits. Nice upward path. When quits are going up, what does it say? It says people are feeling comfortable and robust, and they're going, I can get another job. You can't abuse me anymore. I'm out of here. I'm going to do something else. Nice upward pattern. But where is it? Still well below where we were before the recession. Again, trying to look at the data and say, why does it feel like it's not been a really robust recovery when in fact most of the data are showing very positive things? Here's the other line. This is reds. This is the layoffs. Notice layoffs went way up in the recession and then sort of tailed off here and have tailed off significantly. This tells me if you've got a job, there's a pretty good chance that you can keep your job, all right? But this is the most important indicator we have. As long as this continues to grow, you're starting to see a little more robust economy. The consumer confidence indicators align very well with this quit rate. Okay. This is the one slide I want to show you when I talk about those structurally unemployed people. This is where I think the best evidence. This blue line here is what we call the U6 unemployment rate. That's the unemployment rate that includes people who are marginally unemployed. In other words, they're marginally attached. They're no longer looking for work, but they have looked for work in the last year. Those people that are working part-time but want to be working full-time. And then a group that we just call discouraged workers. They've completely given up looking for work. And we add all those three together, that unemployment rate here is a little over 12% in the country. So we can talk about a 5.5% unemployment rate or 5.8% unemployment rate in the nation, but when you add all of those other conditions to it, you're talking about an unemployment rate that's a little over 12%. Now this red line over here is this other axis. This is the length of time that the average person is unemployed. So down here, back before the recession, the average length that somebody was unemployed was about 8 weeks. All right, 8 weeks. Was about 15, 16 weeks over here. Notice it went way up after the recession. Pretty hard to get a job, not a lot of job creation. And the number has been creeping down, but still the average length of time it's taking people to get a job, somewhere between 33 and 34 weeks. All right, for those people that don't have a job and don't have a marketable skill set, life seems very tough. And like I said, a little over 4.1 million people fit that structurally unemployed category. Okay, a little about the labor market. Texas, obviously, if you had to live someplace during a recession, Texas has added more jobs than any of the other major states. And this little red line here is the unemployment rate or the job growth rate. So we not only have added more net job growth, but have the highest net job growth rate of any of the other states. So what does that look like? Here are all the metropolitan areas. And you go, Rich, I knew you were going to throw one of those spaghetti charts at me sooner or later. Don't pay any attention to anything other than the shape of this. This black line is the United States. This is an index number. This goes back to 2004 through the present. This is the U.S. recession, dip in employment, and the slow, even but slow recovery. The United States got back to the same level of employment that we had before the recession 4 months ago. Right? So that's almost a 5.5 year recovery. Now, interestingly, all those other colors here are the 5 major metropolitan areas in the state. Notice that the growth rate had been much more robust, even though it was at a lower level, much more robust than the nation before the recession. We didn't go as deep as the U.S. as a whole, but look at the recovery. And this little red dotted line, my friends, is Austin. So if it doesn't feel like Austin has really been much of a recession, it's because there is no better place, except maybe Collin County in the Dallas area or maybe Fort Bend, Woodlands area in the Houston area. There is no better place to ride out a recession and a recovery than what we've had here in Austin. Okay, but you'll notice that that recovery for all 5 major metropolitan areas has been very strong. Which industries have been adding jobs? On this particular chart, this YOY is year over year, so August 2013, August 2014, 3.5% annual growth rate, pretty evenly split between goods producing and service providing. Goods producing industries are construction, manufacturing. And so you'll see here construction, 4.5% is above the average. Mining, 9.1%. All right, so clearly the oil and gas extraction, which is where mining is, has been very significant. And even manufacturing at 2% here, less than the average, but there's a lot of what we call creative destruction going on. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you, if you're not looking at the manufacturing sector, there's a lot of people that are losing their jobs that don't have the appropriate skill sets, but probably 5 of the top 10 most significant skill shortages that we have in the state are in manufacturing-related fields. They're in pneumatics and robotics. They're in industrial repair. They're in numeric process control. They're in all kinds of fields that are related to keeping those automated advanced manufacturing assembly lines moving. The industry sector that's adding the most jobs here, this is retail and wholesale trade, transportation, and utilities at a 4% growth rate. Here's that professional and business services I mentioned before, 73% job growth rate at a 5% rate, education and healthcare services. So clearly, while we've had job growth in these goods-producing areas, the top 5 sectors here that have added the most jobs have all been service industries. Okay. From a population standpoint, where has the growth been? I was down in Houston just last week, and I think all 186,000 of them were on I-10, trying to get out of town along with me. But 186,000 followed by San Antonio. It just seems like there's a whole lot more people in San Antonio these days. Just crazy down there. And then there's Fort Worth, 81,000. Dallas proper, 81,000, and here's Austin. So comes in the fifth largest population growth along the way. But it's not the only Austin metro area that's experienced growth. There's Williamson County right here at 32,000, and number 20 on my list is down in the San Marcos area. We all know that San Marcos topped a lot of the population growth areas in 2013, 2014 growth at a rate of almost 7% growth rate, all right, which is pretty phenomenal. But here's the larger picture in terms of population. This is the state of Texas, and all of the counties, and the red counties between 2000 and 2010 actually lost population. 79 counties in that area lost population. The blue counties are the counties that added the most population along the way. Anything interesting about that? Look where those blues are. In fact, let me draw this for you. See this little triangle here? We call that the Texas boot or the Texas triangle. A little over 70% of all the population growth in the state during that decade was within that Texas triangle. Notice this is the periphery, the outskirts, Harris County right here, Houston, the outskirts right here, all up and down I-35. You've got a little population growth or some severe population growth down here in the Lower Valley and a little bit out here in El Paso. But look at all of this West Texas population decline. Now, you go, well, Rich, why do I care about that? Where's all that oil and gas activity happening? Where's it happening? Well, that Eagle Ford shale we hear so much about, it's down here. And that Midland, Odessa area is right here. And those new Klein shale fields are right here. Where's the population going to come from that's going to provide the labor force to be able to maximize all that economic activity? And the answer is it's a real challenge for the state. Because as we congregate towards the cities, we've got increasing amounts of our economic recovery and our job growth taking place outside those major metropolitan areas. So much so that we actually have another little triangle, a mini triangle here, that's South San Antonio down over here to Corpus Christi and over here to Laredo, that's starting to take advantage of that Eagle Ford shale area. Okay. And here's the other demographic that I want to show you. All right, so there's only 1 or 2 old guys in this room, right? So that's like me and, okay, all the rest of you. Okay, so this blue bar right here is the percentage of, we're talking about Texas employment by baby boomers, Generation X, the millennials, and the silent generation. Those are those World War II people. All right, now notice way back here in 2000, here's where the baby boomers are. They represented around 48%, 47% of the labor force. And these were the Gen Xers right here. See this gap? Does anybody remember back in 2000 we said, oh my goodness, all those baby boomers are going to retire? And then what are we going to do? We're going to have this huge skills gap going on, right? Huge labor force gap. But what happened? Look at this. The damn baby boomers stayed in pretty much, all right? However, over time, a couple of interesting phenomena has happened. Between 2002, when baby boomers represented 44% of the labor market, and all the way down here to 2012, baby boomers now represent 31% of the labor market, a drop of 12 points. Down here, The Gen Xers stayed about the same, but here's those millennials, all right? Here's our young people. In 2002, they were just a gleam in the eye of the labor market, all right, representing about 8%. By 2012, 29% of employment is in the millennial generation. We figure that somewhere around 2015 or 2016, there will be more employed millennials in the labor market than there will be baby boomers. Why do we care? We care a lot because there are certain skill sets that the baby boomers will be taking out of the labor market and certain new skills that the millennials will be bringing into the labor market, and how do those skill sets match the demand of the business community? It's interesting to note, because what we're going to talk about here in a minute is what are these people, what are these millennials bringing to the labor market? What skill sets, what are they studying, all right, that they're going to be able to bring to the labor market? And what skill sets are these folks losing? The other thing is attitude. And we're going to talk a lot, I remember I said we're going to close with will and skill. It's a lot about attitude. We've still got a lot of baby boomer hiring authorities that are looking for people that walk and talk like they do, all right? And when you start interviewing millennials, they have a tendency to think about the work-life trade-off and balances in a very, very different way than old white guy baby boomers, all right? It just is. Have you heard the stories from HR people about millennials bringing their parents to the job interview? Yeah? Of millennials taking phone calls during an interview? Excuse me just a second, I got to get this when you're interview. Now, a baby boomer would go, oh my God, that's unbelievable, all right? Millennials think nothing of that. So there are certain attitudes that are transitioning here. And for those of us that are a little older in the tooth, those little baby boomers, and we go, well, we're not going to pay any attention to that because we don't care about those millennials, well, we better start caring, because they are here and they are coming in force, and they will be the largest American demographic that this country has ever seen. So it makes a big difference where we care. All right. Metropolitan areas, Texas, MSA, metropolitan areas. This is the unemployment rates. So you get Midland, Odessa, 2.8, 3.4%. If you can't get a job, go to Midland. Go to Odessa. Do you know Odessa is hiring workers at Wendy's and starting them around $15, $16 an hour to work at Wendy's with sign-on bonuses? Why? Because the unemployment rate is so low that they can't find anybody that has the specific skills they're looking for, much less general skills, all right? You've got serious labor shortage areas. Now look at these areas here that are all at the top of this list. Where are they? The lowest unemployment rate areas. Where are they in the state? They're all out there in West Texas, aren't they? And what did we just talk about that area, West Texas, and from a population standpoint? All those people leaving, all that economic activity happening, and where are those jobs? They're out there where that economic activity is taking place. Now, there's a huge difference here between getting a job in Midland and if you live in the Brownsville, Harlingen, McAllen, Edinburgh area down here at anywhere between 9 and 10% unemployment rate. Does it mean there's no economic activity going on down there? And the answer is no. There's jobs being created. There's a lot of economic activity. The Valley is a very vibrant place these days. It's just that population and labor force growth is so much larger, it's outpacing economic growth. All right. Another one of those charts where we don't pay any attention to anything other than the shape. This is the recession. This is industry job growth, major industries. This is the recession. So this green line is construction. Notice construction employment went way down. This blue line is mining. Notice during the recession, boom, mining went down. Professional business services down. Manufacturing down. But look at the recovery. Remember I said this has been an oily recovery? Look at mining right here. Boom, through the roof mining. Construction took a little while. We had to work off some of that excess housing before we really started building new stuff. But we're starting to do that now. Construction is doing well. There's that professional business services, nice upward trajectory. Manufacturing, adding a few workers. Again, mostly churn going on in that sector. So you say, well, Rich, what does it look like in the state as a whole? Jennifer, you ready to do this one for me? Okay, so watch. These industries change over time, 96, 97, 98. This is the dominant industry in this sector, in the state.
So that means there's some shortages, right, in the healthcare
Yes, there are. All right, this is what this looks like. 2000, by the time we got to 2014, the only areas where healthcare and social assistance here is not the largest industry sector are down here in the Refinery area, down in the Beaumont area. The retail trade of the suburban areas around Dallas and around Austin, the mining area out there in the Permian Basin, a lot of non-durable goods manufacturing in the Panhandle, cheese and tortillas and livestock and related stuff like that. And then education right here in green, of course, that's where Texas A&M is sitting, right? So when you look at this transition, are we becoming a healthcare-dominated industry state? And the answer is yes. And does that lead to healthcare shortages or possible healthcare shortages, worker shortages? Absolutely, it will. All right. Here's the Austin hiring. You want to know which Austin employers are hiring? What do they look like? You know, you listen to you read the paper and you go, this company is laying off workers, and this company is adding workers, and they're making all these announcements, and it's really hard to keep it all straight. So we pay attention to the headlines, but we also just want to go back and say, okay, if we were to look at the records and say who really got hired, not what the announcements were, but who really got hired and in which industries, this is what they look like. Number one on this list is administrative and support services. That is a fancy way to talk about personnel supply services or temp companies. All right. Interesting factoid. Last year, in 2013, almost 14% of all Texas four-year college graduates got their first job through a temporary help industry. All right, it is increasingly a part of the fabric. It's how people are getting jobs. Almost 14% of our four-year college graduates got their first job through personnel supply services. However, this is the monthly new hire wage. The monthly new hire wage, not the wage for all workers, but the wage for just new hires. $29,000. Number two, food service, eating, drinking places, educational services, especially trade contractors. This is in the construction area. We mentioned that professional technical services again. Notice we talked about those being high skill, high wage, average of almost $61,000 for new hires in that sector. Yeah, Kathleen? Monthly, yeah, that's a monthly. Oh, I'm sorry. I translated it for this slide. The data is available monthly. I annualized it. So, yeah, thank you. So it's a yearly wage, yeah. Yeah, thank you. When you get this data from the Census Bureau, it comes on a monthly basis, but it's easier to annualize it. It makes more sense. So thank you, Kathleen. Anything interesting about this list, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah, this is a computer and electronics manufacturing down here at 80,000. Some construction down here. Healthcare is not actually on in this top 15. Where you'd go, wow, that's interesting. With all the hiring you'd think that's going on, that it would show up here. This social assistance and child care takes care of some healthcare areas, but not direct ambulatory healthcare or hospital healthcare. Hospitals have not been hiring. Most of the hiring in the healthcare area has been in ambulatory healthcare. You know, those medical services, you know, places you see in those little strip malls going along, MediClinic. It's also been in a lot of those cancer clinics and specialty areas. But in terms of total employment over the last, this is a 2-year period from 2011 to 2013, not a lot of net hiring in that sector. What else is interesting here, though? This is for Austin. I'm going to go back to that bifurcation of the Austin economy. What do you see just by this one chart? You see an awful lot of actual hires in low-wage industry sectors. Now, it doesn't mean that every worker in that industry is a low-wage worker. There are a lot of high-skilled professional workers, even in lower-skilled or lower-paying industries, right? But by and large, when you look at some of the industries that are dominating this, where do they tend to be? In some of our wholesale retail, or some of our retail, leisure, and hospitality, and lower-paid industries. Now, we mentioned this business, professional, scientific, and technical services area. Let's look a little more detailed. What does that really look like? This is what it really looks like. Anything interesting about that list? When I say professional, technical, and business services, what are we focusing on? AWW is the average weekly wage here. It's mostly related to what? Computer-related services, computer design services, management, technical consulting service, architectural engineering services, and accounting services, all right, dominated that list. What are the occupations related to that? If you do a staffing pattern of the occupations that are critical to that sector, which occupations would they be? This is what they look like, and here's the usual or preferred education associated with it. Anything interesting here?
So where's the healthcare professionals?
We're not even there yet. We're just talking about this professional technical services industry sector here. What you see is this bifurcation that we're talking about. You see a lot of high skill, high wage occupations in this industry, but you've also seen a lot of lower skill, low wage. You see that bifurcation going on here. All right. Let me talk a little bit about productivity, because I want to transition into the applications of technology and what people are studying. Output. This is the amount of goods and services that are being produced in the manufacturing sector, and this is the number of jobs that's associated with that. Is it possible to produce more stuff with fewer people? And the answer is in the manufacturing sector it certainly has been. In agriculture it is. And is it also starting to influence the service industries? And the answer is absolutely it is. Here's a company just as an example, Amgen. You all know Amgen. It's a drug maker, right? Amgen announced that it would plan to lay off 15% of its workforce, close 4 sites, and it reported second quarter financial results. So you'd think if a company closed 4 sites, laid off 15% of its workforce, what do you think would have happened to its stock price? You'd think it would. You'd think it'd be bad news, right? But what happened? Amgen stock climbed $6.70 or 5%. Why is that? Because the financial markets are rewarding being lean and mean and profitable rather than rewarding job growth and expansion. So this decoupling process between economic output and job creation and the financial markets or the profitability of companies, that process has been very significant. The financial markets have been rewarding companies that are becoming increasingly profitable. And as they get increasingly profitable, sometimes those cuts have come where? In the job side of the marketplace. All right. How many of you agree with this statement? Technology should be deployed wherever possible to free humans from drudgery and repetitive tasks. What do you think? How many of you think you'd lose your job if you got rid of all the drudgery and repetitive tasks? All right, okay, who knows? All I know is this. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who earn honest livings from drudgery and repetitive tasks. What happens when you increasingly apply technology in a lot of different workplace environments? What happens to the employment that used to be associated with those? Does it change? Is it modified? Is the skill set modified? And is the number of jobs created modified? Absolutely. New technologies are encroaching into human skills in a way that's completely unprecedented. It's always been thus. Technology has always led to new job skills, but it's happening at lightning speed. What's missing out of this picture? How do you make cars with very, very few people? Who does the work? Robots and the technology and the process. What's missing from this picture? Who's doing the work here? The machines and who? The customers. The machine and the customers. Are you okay with this? You have to be, right? Because they don't give you any other alternatives. What about this? This is a refinery. This is a Valero refinery. $3.5 billion in capital expenditure to create this. How many people does it take to run it? About 75 people, about half of which are sitting in dark rooms with a dozen computer screens, all monitoring the electronic flow of distillates and intermediate products, all with associate's degrees in industrial process technicians and industrial process engineering. This is a Nike warehouse, distribution center and warehouse. What's missing here? Well, first thing I noticed when I asked this question the very first time is shoes. Where's the dang shoes? I don't see any shoes, but here, there's a couple of people. There's a person over here working. There's a couple of people down here. There's somebody over there. Do they look very important? They look particularly engaged? If they're not working very hard, they don't look like they're all that important. What are we paying them? Probably not a lot, right? So who's making the money? Who are the most important people to keep this place running? Those industrial maintenance machinery technicians, the people that are programming the lines, the people that are involved in the logistics associated with it, those are the people that you don't see, but they're the ones that are making the money and making this go. Anybody recognize this picture? It's from a company called Fibo, which is one of the fastest growing fast food joints in the Netherlands. We used to recognize this concept as an automat. An automat. You'd come in, over here, these are little windows. You swipe your debit card, and you pull food out of it. And the food that's in it comes from restaurants from all over the city, all right, because they're all participating in this. How many people does it take to run this place? Yeah, you got to have somebody that's stuffing the food in. You got to have somebody to clean it every once in a while, and a few auto-sorted things. Right across the street, and I've actually been here. It's very cool. Right across the street from this is a McDonald's. They do roughly the same volume of sales. But Fibo does it with 1/3 of the costs. All right? Now, everybody put your business hats on. You are generating the same level of sales, and you have an opportunity to do it with 1/3 of the costs. All right? Who's interested in Fibo? Absolutely. Is it possible to translate this same model, at least in some places in the United States, if the cost of labor continues to rise? The answer is absolutely it's possible. Right? So while we like to see dollars flow in the hands of people at the lower end of the wage spectrum, is it possible, and is technology allowing business to be able to say, no, at some point, there's only so much I want to pay for wages, and I can make modifications in technology? And the answer is yes. All right. By the way, anybody ever seen a 3D printer? Played with a 3D printer at all? It's cool, isn't it? This is a house. It was printed by the Chinese using 3D printing technology. All right? The exact same thing. So the architectural designer, every one of those is about a 4-inch wide layer that's printed with a special material composite and binding material. The Chinese printed 5 of these houses in one day at the average cost of about $49,000, almost $5,000. How many of you want to live in this house? Nah. All right. How many people around the world would give anything to be able to live in a house with that much structural rigidity? All right. And the answer is a lot. 3D printing. Did we just change the occupational skill nature of the construction industry using 3D printing technology? And the answer is only limited by our imaginations. Okay. All of these technologies, disruptive technologies, you're going to see a lot of this, the Internet of Things, everything connected. It's very hard to understand what the real labor market impact is going to be here. But here are some occupational titles. I said I was going to mention skills. Occupational titles are really important. Anybody recognize any of these job titles? Anybody know what a chief listening officer is? I guarantee you it's not your spouse, all right? The chief listening officer is the person that's monitoring the social media to see how other people are talking about your company, all right, and making sure that your company is being spoken of highly in the process. The 2 hottest fields here are this one right here, the big data integration engineer. Those are all those people that work at Amazon and the like. When you provide all your information and somebody's gathering all that information and then turns around, analyzing it and trying to figure out how to offer you something that you might want to buy next. Let me give you one really great example of what this big data means. I sat in on a conversation with Jeff Immelt a couple of weeks ago. He's the GE CEO. And he said that every GE engine, they make big jet engines, every GE engine collects 1 terabyte of data per flight. Every engine, every flight segment, 1 terabyte of data. How many flights a day are there in the United States? It's about 3,800 flights, right? 3,800 flights just by Southwest Airlines. All right, so think about how much data is being created in terms of analytics and data analytics. Both Jeff Immelt and I forget the other guy's name. Yeah, it'll come to me. Anyway, the hottest field for GE is, BNSF Railroad. The hottest field for both of those companies is in big data engineering, analytics. The second biggest one is this one right here, cybersecurity, everything related to cybersecurity. Both of those related to IT-related skills. Okay. Yeah. No, in order to make this list, you had to have at least 10 online job postings in order to make this list. All right, so these are not most popular. These are not most popular, and there's no order to this. It's just 20 that I grabbed just to show that you've got a lot of job titles out there that are hardly recognizable to anybody, and yet there's a lot of job opportunities that sit underneath that. If you're from the education world and you're trying to train into these, how do you know what the skill sets required are? It's a really hard thing to know because everybody knows that. I don't know. What are you worried about that one? Cyborg anthropologist is somebody who studies the application of technology in a manufacturing environment and the interplay between humans and technology in a manufacturing environment. Wow. And studies the application of that and tries to optimize the interplay between humans and technology in a manufacturing environment. And studies how that evolves over time. That's an easy one. Don't you have any of the others that you really want to? All right. By the way, let me make a really quick plug. We have a brand new website at the Workforce Commission. It's called texasskillstowork.com. If you go here, you can upload your resume, Word format, PDF format, whatever it happens to be. It will create a skill profile for you, a skill profile for your resume. And then at the same time, we are collecting over 300,000 online job postings, and we are creating skill profiles of those, all using a common skill language, all right? So what happens if you upload your resume, it gets skill profile, and then you click on a button that says Find Jobs, and it will tell you which of those online jobs best match your skill profile. Not at the occupational title or the major level, but at a skill-to-skill level. We did this originally for the military. That's why it kind of has a military look to it, but it works great for everybody, including and especially the disabled. So for folks that have abilities and they're trying to optimize their abilities, identifying them and then finding jobs that match the things they can do is a really important step in terms of dealing with the disability community. Okay. Where's the job openings right now? Most of the job openings where most of the people, which is most of the activity, which is in the big 5 metropolitan areas. What do those occupations look like? Number 1 on that list, registered nurses. Number 2 is truck drivers with a CDL, all right, commercial driver's license. What else is interesting about this list? You see an awful lot of what? You've got an interesting mix over here. Again, a lot of those short-term OJT is less than 1 month on the job training, no particular credential or certification required. The ones that require bachelor's degrees tend to be in what fields here? Other than nursing at the top, tend to be in IT-related fields, all right? This is what they look like for Austin. And Kathleen, in this case, these are actually the number of current online job postings in the Austin metro area, active the last 90 days as of yesterday, right? Anything interesting about this list? It is almost all service. Yeah, a lot of these are related work experience. That's what that is, related work EXP, related work experience. The occupations that require degrees tend to be in which areas? IT and management consulting areas, all right? With interesting numbers of job openings in retail sales and customer service reps and retail sales supervisors, supervisor of office workers, supervisor food prep, all right? High skill, high wage, low skill, low wage. Ladder. So you see that bifurcation in these online job postings here. Going forward, there's healthcare patterns. This is our projections between 2012 and 2022. These are the occupations Fastest growing, not most jobs, but fastest growing here, growth rate, right? Anything interesting about that list? Fastest growing, remember the economic tent post that we had? Population, the oil and gas sector, all right? Remember we started talking about population, talked about education and healthcare. What do you see there? Education, healthcare, there's your engineering. This welding and brazing machine operators and industrial machinery mechanics, those are two fast-growing fields that are mostly in the manufacturing sector. This is the fastest-growing occupations requiring higher education. Requiring higher education. Anything interesting about that list? Yeah, we call associate's degree AAS above a higher education in this case. Yeah, Kathy. That one? That is the actual mean salary in the Texas labor market here. So it's the mean. It's not the new hire or the experienced. It's the mean. All right, good question. Anything interesting about this list? Now, I thought this was interesting. Interpreters and translators showed up on this list for the very first time of our projections. Why? In a global economy, what do you need? People who understand multicultural nature of a global environment. Information security analysts, all right, we already talked about that, cybersecurity related things. A lot of healthcare and a lot of people who teach healthcare. Here's our nurse practitioners. Those nurse practitioners are the ones that are showing up in all those mediclinics and ambulatory healthcare clinics. Fastest growing area here. Logisticians have made that list. Again, talking about a lot of goods being moved around the world. Sir? There are very few occupations where the preferred education is a master's degree. And the ones that do show up in MSWs, right, and Masters in Education, which happen to be the two lowest paid master's degree fields that we have. It's just the way the labor market works. Now, it doesn't... Now, it doesn't mean that employers don't value those degrees, all right? It doesn't mean they don't value them, but from a pure labor market and from a pure demand standpoint, not a lot of economic activity relative to other occupations. Good question. Absolutely, skill sets and experience. I think that's exactly correct. This is kind of what we think that picture looks like. Going forward, or 2020, 2022-ish, a big chunk of the labor market is down here with no formal education. Maybe some certifications going on, but no formal education over a high school diploma. These up here are higher education. This is bachelor's degree or more. The ears of my chalice, by the way, this is a chalice. This isn't a toilet bowl. This is a chalice, all right? You're going to look at that and you go, oh, yeah, I see it. These are the associate degrees that we're talking about. These are the ones that are in skilled technical fields in healthcare, construction, manufacturing, high skill, high wage, populated currently by a lot of really old people that are transitioning out of those jobs. All right, so a lot of opportunities emerging. And the fastest growing rate, fastest growing segment by education is in our associate degree areas. Only about 23% of all the projected job openings will require a bachelor's degree or higher, Now, that said, we figure there's somewhere between another 8 or 10% of all the jobs where you have to have a bachelor's degree just to be able to apply for the job. Doesn't mean the work itself requires a degree, but you're not eligible for the job unless you have a degree. Best example of that, anybody know right offhand which company in America employs more four-year college graduates than any other? Well, that's a good guess. It's not true, but it's a good guess. What else? Enterprise rental car. Enterprise rental car. Every management trainee that you see in enterprise rental car has a bachelor's degree in something. All right. Why? That's their business model. A lot of them will wash out. Some will move on in the management training program, but they take only bachelor's degree. Now, does it take a bachelor's degree to be a rental car clerk? No. All right. But there's a lot of jobs where we're using the college diploma as that filtering mechanism. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Uh-huh.
If more jobs are requiring less degrees for people to get hired, how do people who don't have a degree get in that door?
Because less and less the hiring authorities are not worrying about the degrees. So they'll put the degree on the job posting, but they'll entertain resumes that have the skill sets and the experience, all right, that would be the equivalent to it. And so what you see is there's still, there's still a lot of those old baby boomers that are thinking about the world in the old way. But what they're increasingly looking at is say, this is a bachelor's degree. We really want somebody with a bachelor's degree. But, if we've got somebody with the right skill sets and experience, that degree really doesn't mean all that much. All right?
And also a question.
Yeah.
So now the healthcare is on top of the list of jobs, and it's becoming till 220. Why?
Yep. Hold that thought just one quick second, because on this diagram, you've got a lot of healthcare occupations that are right here. Your technical healthcare technologists and technicians. You've got obviously a lot in this higher ed, but you've got a big chunk in those home healthcare aides and personal care aides that are down here on this bottom side. So across the whole healthcare sector, right? It's an interesting microcosm of this entire model. Sorry.
So why do, we hear the legislation is to lower the income for doctors, for example. So there's shortages, but why there's actually lowering the income?
Well, I call that a 2 tequila conversation. So, after we finish, you can meet me in the bar, have a couple tequilas. I'll tell you exactly what I think about that. But, as far as the healthcare marketplace, some of us believe, and I would be part of that camp, would believe the more you allow the free market to work in terms of setting wages for skills drives labor market activity and drives labor supply. And so when you put artificial caps, whether they're ceilings or floors, on wages, especially in professional positions, you skew the labor market and you skew the supply, and you end up with some really odd imbalances. And is it possible that the more you have government intervention and regulation in that process, that you'll get skewed wages, you'll get a skewed supply-demand picture? Absolutely. Right. One way of thinking about it. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a problem with the society not valuing positions like teacher or nurse, for example, which are traditionally female positions, not valuing them high enough. So when you talk about the free market, what the free market do, and I understand a lot of value in doing that, but the problem is that some of these professions that, from a societal perspective, I think we should be valuing higher, don't get valued enough in the free market.
Well, I would agree with that 100%, which is why you can't have unfettered capitalism, because unfettered capitalism causes huge imbalances related to that. So you've got some sectors where you really have to put some floors underneath wages. But the truth of the matter is, from a societal, you talk about society, from a society standpoint, we all have the opportunity to pay more tax dollars that should be dedicated to more expenditures to go into education and hopefully into teaching, because a big chunk of education expenditures don't ever make it to the teachers, right, in that process. But we as a society are choosing to pay lower taxes, and certainly here in Texas that's true, our model, where we're putting less and less money into taxes, less and less money available for our public institutions and education as a whole. So what would you say we do? Goes back to the whole nature of what is somebody worth? What are you worth? And I don't know, the only thing, from a labor market standpoint, the only thing you're worth is what somebody is willing and able to pay you. So that goes back to a whole worth thing. Let's say I've got a PhD, but I can't find a job in my field, and so I end up working at a dry cleaner's. What am I worth to the labor market? Well, I'm only worth what my most recent employer is willing to pay me, even though I'm a highly educated and well-rounded person. I'm really only worth, from a labor market standpoint, what my current employer is paying me. Doesn't mean we don't have a lot of underutilized skill sets and certainly underappreciated professions. So the question is, what do? Do you set floors on all of those socially important occupations? They should, because we are already valuing it. We are the labor market. We are society, and we are the labor market. How many of you like $10 hamburgers? How many of you like $15 hamburgers? At some point, we go, you know what? A hamburger is not worth any more than $8, and that's all we're willing to pay. And society as a whole And we are society, and that makes us, we are the labor market, we are the determinants. We have decided that there are certain fields that are only worth so much to us. Social work is a big issue. The one that's really going to kill us in this state is home health care and personal care aides. We need tens of thousands of personal care aides in this state going forward as the baby boomer population ages, and we pay those people nothing, and the working conditions are awful, and the number of people that are available to fill those jobs are not going to be there in this labor scenario. And what are we going to do about that? It's going to be a major problem. Now, the free market would say that that when those severe shortages happen, that employers will have to start raising the wage rates in order to compensate appropriately. I don't know how long it'll take the market to adjust according to the shortage that we're already seeing in those areas. All right. Yeah, okay, so is more education better? Yes, more education is always better. The more education you have, median weekly earnings, more education, higher earnings, more education, lower unemployment rate. Education is always good, but do we pay every major the same? Do we pay every major the same? Here's my favorite quote. We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion and medicine, law, business, engineering. These are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. Anybody remember the Dead Poets Society? Right? How many of you agree with this statement? What do we pay our poets? Not anywhere near what we pay our engineers, our lawyers, our business people, and our doctors. All right, so is there a difference in the labor market? And the answer is absolutely there is. By the way, anybody know, according to this movie, anybody remember why we woo women? Why we write poetry? I gave away the punchline. Why we write poetry? To woo women. All right. Highest earning college programs. Highest earning college programs 1 year post-exit. Highest earning with programs with at least 100 workers in them. Anything interesting about this list? No, there's nursing and computer science and engineering. Here are the lowest earning college programs 1 year post-exit. Now, nobody is going to argue that earnings is everything, all right? Personal satisfaction has a lot to do with one's future and life and happiness. All I'm talking about is what are we valuing from a dollar standpoint. Lowest earning programs 1 year post-exit. You think these with this little asterisk here, these are programs where at least 60% of the graduates are found in graduate school the next year, and it automatically goes on to a master's program. So they kind of don't count. Yes?
What's that jump from about 100 to 1,000 between maybe?
This right up here? That only includes programs that have at least 100 graduates.
Is that what the red column is? Grads?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the red column is the number of graduates. Right? Each year. This is annual graduates. Annual graduates. Uh-huh.
So I actually went a long time ago with my undergraduate economics, and I did my senior thesis in terms of why we choose what we choose to study as a major.
Uh-huh.
And I had my two variables being earnings and occupational outlook. And I wasn't a great scholar by any sense, but I found there was no causation between those two. I mean, as you were doing labor, have you found any other reasons as to why a student chooses to major and what they major in? What I found was ease of major.
Well, what is particularly interesting is what we see is if you can get a job in an area related to the training you received, regardless of discipline, earnings go up. All right? But so many people take jobs that are not related to their discipline, and earnings are going down. So training relatedness, moving from education into a job related to your training, is a really strong indicator of high wages. That said, what we see is a lot of people starting and enrolling in STEM degrees, for example, that as they persist, they're dropping out and they're moving to non-STEM degrees. The last data I looked at, which was from 2012, of all the people that enrolled in a STEM graduate, science, technology, engineering, math, that enrolled in a STEM discipline, less than 6% that changed majors changed to a additional STEM major, right? The other 94% went into non-STEM majors. Now, does that mean that they're going to easier programs? I would never say that, all right? But when you start talking to your engineering students and they see their buddies that are majoring in marriage and family wandering off to the bar every night, they start thinking, you know, I'm working pretty hard for this. Now, not to beat up any of those, because I don't know the answer to your question. I can just tell you from a labor market standpoint, this is an entire cohort, by the way. This is an entire cohort. So everybody that studied this. Now, some of these people in here went off and made $100,000, right? And some of them made $6 million, right? So it's an entire cohort, right? These are on average. On average, a bachelor's degree in petroleum engineering earned you $100,000 1 year post-exit, all right? So what we do see from the enrollment to graduation patterns is people choosing to enroll in STEM disciplines, migrating out of STEM disciplines. Exactly why? There's a lot of research related to it. Easier is one of those answers. Okay. Here are the highest earning associate's degrees. Highest earning associate degrees. So the only question I have for you is, these earnings over here for highest earning associate degrees, are these earnings more like these or more like these? And the answer is a lot more like these. All right. So there are a lot of these associate degree programs where the 1 year post-exit pay is really good. Now, the 3, 5, 10-year earnings trajectories are lower with associate degree programs, but the 1 to 3 year post-exit earnings for a lot of these are very high, all right? And keep in mind, these are only 2-year programs, okay? And the answer to this really is math. The more applied, the better you are at applied mathematics, the more money you're going to make. All right, do kids have an understanding of this at all? Charles Schwab did an interview, asked teenagers 13 to 18, what is your expected starting salary, and what will your salary be once you're in a career? Everybody got a number in your head? You got a number? Starting, $73,000 a year. Boys a little more ambitious than the girls. What about once you get established in your career, how much money? $150,000. All right, so we have a little reality check problem going on here, which is why we created this application, www.texasrealitycheck.com. You go in, you build a budget, you build a lifestyle budget. This is where I want to drive, this is what I want to live, this is the kind of stuff. And at the end, you say, okay, here's what my lifestyle is going to cost. Now let's look at some occupations that will allow me to be able to afford that occupation. Do what?
So we need that for adults.
We do need it for adults. Absolutely. In fact, it works for everybody. It's kind of interesting. Okay. This is what our kids are studying. This is what they actually are graduating with. All right, number of grads, 1 year post-exit earnings. This is what they're actually studying. My question to you is, to what degree does this list seem to match what we've just talked about for the last 50 minutes in terms of the labor market? Do these fields seem to match what we've been talking about? No engineering. Where's your IT stuff? Where you got your nursing up here, okay? That's about it. What is the rest of this? And when you come over here and you look at these 1 year post-exits, where are those $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year jobs? And the answer is, kids, especially millennials, are choosing to study things that are of interest to them with less regard to the labor market. It just appears that that's true, and that's what the research is telling us. But the kids that do choose fields that have strong relationships to the labor market are doing exceptionally well, leading to the bifurcation of earnings even among college graduates. All right, it's very interesting. Well, baby boomers did some of that too, but the millennials are less inclined to do that, thinking about the world in a different way. By the way, if you want to see what various cohorts have earned in the post-exit period, in other words, if you want to say what have been people, if I majored in history from Sam Houston State, what happened to everybody else that majored in history in Sam Houston State, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year post-exit? You can go to this website, brand new website. It's our Texas Cruise. It's our consumer reporting system, and you can check out those data. Okay. Now, let me wrap up. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody being here. Let me wrap up with a couple of things about that employers really are consistently telling us. 1, good communication skills. 2, the appropriate technical knowledge for the job that you've got. 3, can you work with people who are of a different age, race, gender, and education level to you, because the labor market is becoming increasingly diverse, as we've already talked about. Do you have a can-do and pleasant attitude? Attitude means a lot to the business community. And number 5 is critical thinking skills. So what does that mean? Getting prepared and preparing others for the workplace of the 21st century is a balance between will and skill. Skills, strong academics, meaningful high school diploma, the appropriate post-secondary education and technical skills. But is it enough? Just getting the education, is it enough? And the answer is, in a very competitive labor market, it's not. Oops. Sorry. So that leads us to these, what we call workplace basics, soft skills, workplace fundamentals, getting along with others, critical thinking. For those of you in the executive function world, conscientiousness, all right, the ability to do things and follow through with things you say you're going to do. These kinds of skills. Oral communication, written communication, leadership, teamwork, followership, appreciation of diversity. The business community will tell you that when you get hired, everybody that they interview already has the hard skills. Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking to you. What are they really interviewing you for? The degree to which you are going to fit in their organization and have these kinds of skills. Soft skills is, every time you talk to an employer, these soft skills, workplace basics, is the one thing that they keep talking about. Here's some samples. This is a waiter. This is a soft skill profile for a waiter and waitress. Soft skill customer service, oral communication, resource allocation, and attention to detail. Do I want my waitresses and waiters to have these kinds of soft skills? The answer is yes. Do I care whether my economists have that same? No. Or my chemical engineers? My chemical engineers, problem solving, numerical and arithmetic ability, critical thinking, written communications. Every field has its most important soft skills as well. Do we care? This guy for Boeing, Rick Stevens, gave us a great quote. He says, there's not one thing or skill people have to work for us, but I can tell you why we fire people. Soft skills. We hire them for hard skills. We fire them for soft skills. All right? Is it enough? In the 21st century, I will guarantee you that no employer is going to pick you up and carry you for the rest of your career. You have to build your own career ladder. Stackable credentials, informal education, on-the-job learning. Last year, I took a class from MIT in statistics. Are you impressed? I was. It was cool, all right? I actually took it just so I could tell somebody that I took a statistics class from MIT. I took it online. It was one of those MOOCs, right? I could take it online. I understood most of it. Most of it, right? Was I able to improve my skill set online and continue to grow by accessing education for things that are a weak area for me, but I can continue to build my skill set? And the answer was yes, and it was the easiest thing for me to do, all right? Too many of us are letting our skill sets go fallow while the labor market is passing us by. Stackable credentials, informal education, on-the-job learning. And by the way, for those of you counseling others, this is the new career development model. The new career development model is not a career ladder or a career lattice. It is the climbing wall. Everybody's on the wall, but some people find themselves moving at a different pace, at a different place, with a unique support system. Here, see all these people? These people are all on the wall. These are all people either with a job or trying to get a job or trying to move up in the labor market. Now, see this guy right here? How comfortable does he look? All right. Here's the guy that's supporting him right here. What is this guy doing? It doesn't look like he's paying attention to me. I think he's on his cell phone or some such thing. What about this gal over here? She's on the wall, right? She's stretched out, right? Look at her support system down here. They're looking at each other. They're communicating. Everybody's on the wall. Everybody's moving at a different pace. The degree to which the support system can help somebody move along the way becomes very important. And last but not least is the message of personal responsibility. Nobody's going to do it for you. will, the willingness to take a job at a lower level, at a lesser wage. Not every kid is going to start at $75,000 a year. Not going to happen, all right? Willing to take a job at a lower wage, a lower level, lesser wage in a different locale, and showing flexibility and initiative. Flexibility and initiative is one of the best things that you can take to an interview. It said, I am here, I'm bringing my skill sets, and whatever you need me to do is what I'm willing to do to make this company move forward. All right? That becomes a very powerful line. Yep.
This is a personal question. Is volunteer work valuable? You're talking about, graduates, sometimes they can't find work. But what I've found personally, sometimes I've done a lot of volunteer work in my field. They don't count it. Like, employers don't seem to value volunteer work.
Okay, so the question is about volunteer work and the importance of volunteer work to the employer community. And I would say that volunteer work is very important and by and large is recognized by business, just like internships are. Is you get the experience, you get the ability to pick up additional skills, to practice skills. Your ability to explain and translate what you did and what you learned in that volunteer relationship back in the interview to the employer now is an important part of that communication. But being able to using volunteerism to be able to get additional experience is a very powerful thing to do, right up there next to internships. All right, so your ability, again, to explain what you learned and how you did it and why it's important is a whole other issue. So, all right, so with that, balancing will and skill is preparing kids and ourselves for the 21st century. So with that, I hope I gave you a little something to think about. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'll be more than happy to entertain any other questions you might have while we're still hanging out. Anybody? Once? Twice? Yeah?
So this is more of a personal question, but I'm planning on pursuing an engineering degree, but I also want to get a secondary degree with that. But from what I've read, I'm interested in business and marketing as well as law and economics. Which one would pair with an engineering degree the best?
Interesting question. My personal opinion would be economics, all right? Because the application of engineering skills within the context of how business works, I think would be an important discipline. I think it's more important than a general business degree or a general business concentration, all right? Because you get in a business program, you're going to get some marketing and some other related stuff that's not going to help you much. Economics it pays off, and it's one of the highest. It's one of the highest paying majors anyway, all by itself. So that would be my personal opinion. I think there's enough data behind it to substantiate that that's a good intersection and a good idea, by the way. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Thank you, guys.